by Kaizen Synergy Law Firm. I'd like to welcome you all to today's session. Today's session is focusing on the NDIS incident management requirements under the NDIS standards. Now, you can actually use the QR code directly in front of you to actually submit an incident report if you'd like to participate in this workshop directly. And we will actually be looking at specific incidents as they come through today. Today is really a hands-on session for you to participate in. We are going to look at the legal requirements and build off the previous workshop and legal webinar that we ran 2 weeks ago. But what we are going to look at is specifically looking at the requirements under the NDIS standards that you actually need to follow. So it is something that we are going to actually look at directly for you. So let's move forwards with this session, and happy to answer any questions as we go through this session today. Now, one of the options that you do have on here is actually the access to the Gemba 360 NDIS Legal Resources Dashboard. Now, you are able to access this information directly. I am just going to check our audio, if you don't mind, and make sure that you can actually hear us. And at Kaizen Synergy Law Firm, and I'd like to welcome you all to today's session. My apologies, we did have a little bit of audio difficulty this morning, but we are back on track, and I'd like to welcome you all to today's legal webinar. Today, we're going to be looking at specifically the incident management reporting requirements under the NDIS standards, and we're going to follow the NDIS legal requirements for NDIS providers. In front of you now is a QR code. Now, this workshop is designed to be completely interactive as much as you would like to participate in this. You can use this QR code to actually use your mobile phone and scan it to lodge an incident form. And we will actually look at workshopping some of these incidents today. So what is the issue that we see as a law firm for NDIS providers? Well, essentially what we do see, and I'll just give everyone a few minutes just to complete if they want to participate and scan this incident report. But what we do see is NDIS providers, when needing to complete an incident form under the NDIS standards, there are a number of questions that providers continue to ask. One of those is obviously what is reportable to the NDIS, but also do you meet the minimum legal compliance obligations? And sometimes we find that when NDIS providers call us and ask us for legal advice, or they're preparing for an audit, and we actually help agencies prepare for audits and go through that process, but also what are the auditors looking for. And sometimes they get really concerned about, well, what are the requirements that we actually need to meet as NDIS providers? We also hear that at times when, and you might have experienced this yourselves, that calling the NDIS and asking these questions, sometimes it actually depends on who is actually on the other end of the phone, depending on what answer you actually get. And that's not a criticism of the NDIS. This is feedback that NDIS providers have informed us about. Now, just a bit of background, Kaizen Synergy is a law firm that specializes specifically in NDIS legal compliance obligations. And in doing that, we do have a governance, risk and legal compliance and policy center that's actually based at Trobe Law School in Bundoora in Victoria. And we are actually literally down from the Dean's office at the La Trobe Law School site. So we're literally based right in the corridors of the La Trobe Law School. And as part of our office site that is based there, we do provide training to future lawyers that also want to go into and work for organizations exactly like yourselves as NDIS providers or even not-for-profits and community service organizations. So the work that we're doing here is actually providing training on exactly what we provide to students going through in order to understand the compliance obligations under the NDIS standards. Now, all of you that are attending, and this is and we're delighted to see so many people attending today's session, you all actually have access to this demo site, which is where all the legal resources are actually located after today's webinar. You can see some of our previous webinars are also listed here, and other resources are on the notice board on the right-hand side here. This gives you access to all of the legal webinar resources, including PowerPoint slides, policy documents, and you can also go in and have a look at these other tools here. And NDIS providers actually use this dashboard to meet all of their compliance obligations, and you can actually go in and have a look at some of the sample policies that are also located on here for organizations that want to use it for their ongoing requirements. It literally gives you all of the legal compliance tools to comply with all of the NDIS standards. And there is a subscription. If you want to proceed on this, you can have a look at this. And it literally is only $400 a month, excluding GST. And this gives you not only access to this dashboard, but also access to legal advice should you require it as well too. So it's all included as part of this dashboard setup. But by all means, jump in after today's legal webinar and have a look. So where we are going is on the NDIS participant report. So if you have completed this, we will actually jump in and we'll actually have a look at the NDIS form in terms of what your legal obligations are. So we have just completed one here today, and we will come back to this form and start to have a look at it in a few minutes. So what are the legal requirements that agencies need to follow? Well, when we do look at this legal webinar, obviously there are specific requirements that you need to follow. Now, there are under the incident management policy requirements that we spoke about last time, there is specific reporting requirements that organizations do need to follow. And as part of this, what we do see that organizations need to be aware of, and many of you would be across this, is what is reportable, what is a reportable incident. Now, a reportable incident is defined as an act or omission, event or circumstance. Reportable incidents are serious incidents or alleged incidents which result in harm to an NDIS participant and occur in connection with NDIS support services. Now, under the legal rules of this, the incident must be defined as a reportable incident under Section 73Z4 of the Act and Section 16 of the NDIS rules, as well as meet the requirements under the NDIS Quality and Safeguards Commission rules as well. The incident must have occurred or alleged to have occurred in connection with the provision of supports or services you are providing. Now, when we go through and have a look at the definitions, again, we will actually come to this, but I'm actually going to skate through this fairly quickly. We did cover this in our previous webinar. But what we find is that for NDIS providers, generally you will understand what these types of reportable incidents are. And this can include death or serious injury and abuse and unlawful sexual or physical contact. And there's a whole list of reportable incidents. Now, what we do then find for providers is how do you actually identify an incident? So a lot of the time we find that NDIS providers are aware of what their obligations are and the types of incidents, but what we need to look at is how does this look on an actual incident form? And that is where we find that NDIS providers often have the most difficulty. So if there is the understanding, and we will give you copies of these slides. I can see a few people raising hands about can we get copies of these particular slides and answers. And absolutely, you will get all of these copies of all of this material. So when we look at the different incident types, it does cover obviously physical abuse. It does cover sexual assault, psychological abuse, domestic violence, neglect, and you can have a fairly exhaustive list of what this covers, including financial abuse, and then looking at how do you actually report an incident. And this is where we find that NDIS providers have the most difficulty. So let's jump from here and have a look at what information should be covered. Now, often we'll be asked to review NDIS providers where they might use a paper-based form, and generally this is the sort of information that we need to see. Now, this comes from the legal compliance requirements under the standards. So when auditors come through and review your documents, what they're really asking for is, do you have details of the incident or allegation? Is there an initial response? How do you report to reporting bodies, an assessment and risks and consultations? And is there any follow-up actions? And that is what they are actually wanting to see from providers to actually start with. So it is something that we do need to consider as part of this process. Now, what we wanted to look at today was an actual incident report. And let's go back to our form. So where we are here, and I'm just going to, and you will all have access to this after today's webinar. So when we log in to the dashboard, and someone's just asking me, how do we actually log in? Let me just do that for you as well too. So you will be sent a link, and the idea of this, you can just go to gemba360.com. You will be asked to put in your email address and simply click on the login button with the password that we've sent across to you. That will take you to this screen here. Now let's actually have a look for providers at an NDIS incident report and form and what it actually looks like. Now we can see that there was one that was lodged by us just this morning at 9:55. You can see that under my forms here that you're viewing, and I'm simply going to go into this form. Now this form here of where it sits, and I'll just make this slightly bigger so we can see all these fields. So what we have directly done here is create an incident form and workflow specifically based off and compliant with the NDIS standards and also the legislation that I just referred to before in my presentation. The idea of this is that by using a form like this, you automatically comply with the NDIS standards. So let's go through this and unpack this part by part. And again, I can see a few questions coming through. Yes, we will get to all of these. And yes, you will have access to this form to view for your agency too. So when I go in, and I've just used the QR code, so the idea of this is that you don't actually need to log in to, in particular, this dashboard to access this form. Anyone can complete it that's got access to the form. So in this case, I simply completed it, and I did it this morning at 9:50 a.m. And this automatically registers the date and the time that I actually did it. The legal issue that I'm raising is that it's a possible physical abuse on a participant. Now, when I go through, it gives me the option to insert my own reporting policy, and some of you may like to do that. The idea is that if someone is trying to fill this out and wants a bit of an instruction guide, well, then you've got the policy right here for people to be able to view and complete this incident form. Now, under the standards, we need to look at, well, is this a high, medium, or low incidence? Some organisations, and we've tried to keep this simple at this stage, but some organisations might actually have a risk matrix here and a bit more of a detailed risk structure in terms of how they want to report. But most of the time, we'll actually just use high, medium, or low as part of the risk identification. From here, we look at what type is this? Well, is this a general, medication, or staff matter? And we can select those. And that will actually create the branching scenarios you see below. In this case, we're simply going to mark that it's a general matter only. Now, was there a behaviour of concern, which is obviously important when recording a NDIS matter? Now, when we talk of behaviours of concern, what is important to be aware is that these need to be reported as part of the NDIS requirements. And so I can just see people asking, what is a behaviour of concern? Well, a behaviour of concern is any action by a person with a disability that is of such frequency, intensity, or duration that it puts themselves or others at risk of physical harm or seriously limits their quality of life. So again, there might be a question that you need to consider as part of this process. So then we look at what happened. And in this case, we've got it that Federico Flintstone was physically abused by a staff member, and he had to be restrained in this case after hitting a wall. We've got the date and the time of the incident, and then we get the participant details as well as the date of birth that they were, and also if we had the mobile number. We've got the details of the body part that was injured, and also if we're looking at, was there any other people involved in the incident, witnesses, etc. So this is generally what we see here from a general incident report. The other part that we look at was first aid administered, was an ambulance called, or police, etc., or was it all of them? Now, the other parts that we see, and I've just expanded this out, was to look at outcomes of this, which I will come to. Now, when you complete this form, and I've now gone back into the form itself, what you'll find is that we've got details of an action plan. Now, this is actually important in terms of what auditors want to see, but also from a risk mitigation point of view for your agency. And it's this part that is often missed by NDIS providers. So we find that at times, and when I say often, it's when providers contact us and ask us for legal advice on, well, have we actioned this incident form correctly? Have we done enough? Not just correctly, have we done enough? So often what we'll ask is, well, do you have an action plan to show how you actually minimized this risk? What actions did you take? So once an incident is completed, what we do ask people to do is to actually look at an action plan. So in this case, what I'm going to look at is actually say, requirement is I need to provide training to staff on conduct and behavior. And we're going to do with that, an outcome is NDIS compliant with NDIS standards. Now, in this case, I want to make sure that we're actually identifying what's to be done and what the review date is. Now, on this, it is a serious incident, so this is going to start today, and I want this done by the end of the week. In this case, what we are going to look at doing is specifically aligning this to a number of staff in this case. And in this case, what I am going to do is actually just submit this directly to us to actually show you how this actually works. So in this case, what I am going to do is simply go through and allocate these particular tasks to us. But most of the time, you will actually identify these people within your organizations and people that you actually want to make sure are actioning these tasks for you. And it's critically important that when we go through and actually do this, that you actually identify, well, who are the people that we actually want to make sure is completing these particular actions and completing these tasks. So in this case, I am just going to select ourselves from this and make sure that each person is actually completing these actions for us to actually do. So in this case, let's just bring this up and I will select ourselves from this list. And here we are here. And I'll just bring this up for us to be able to see. Here we are here. I've just selected us from this list and the review date for this is now completed. The other part of this is that we also then need to look at, is any other agency notified? So was it NDIS? Was it involved with child safety? No, police, and also it's a work cover because it's an issue that we needed to see. What we then came out to was this a specific requirement that we actually need to see here that is being reported to the NDIS? In this case, we see that it is a serious injury, and consequently what also then gets ticked is that it was physical abuse as well, and that there is an NDIS report to be done. Now, when we do this and select save, this now gets updated. And we've now also got the logs to show what was also being done. And this is important that we have these types of logs that are sitting here. Because it shows us, well, in this case, we've got the details of what has actually been done, when it was reported, when it was actioned, and now it's actually 11:28. And we've got the information of when it was done and why. Now, going into it, what also people ask us is, well, what has been action coming out of this? Now, I can see that this is marked as incomplete. Now, once this is actioned and this has been done, we'll find that this date also gets updated automatically and emails get sent out. So again, what we need to be able to do is close the loop on any incidents that have actually been set up and what's coming out of this from a legal compliance point of view. So quite simply, we find from a legal advice to providers that simply completing incident forms and just lodging the parts to the NDIS is actually not enough to meet your legal compliance obligations. What you do need to also do is actually then write these things up to make sure that you're completing the workflow of the incident reporting. So essentially what we've got, and we'll send this across to all attendees today, is to look at what happened, what was the initial response, do you need to report this to authorities, what was the reportable requirements, does this involve any of the following, and what are the types of incidents that you also need to cover. And also then what happens as part of the assessment and closing of the incident. It's only from here that you can then say, well, we've actually met our legal compliance obligations, and then coming through as part of the report directly to the NDIS, be that via POTA or the likes. Now, on it, what we also find that is useful is that we also, which we will be circulating to organizations, is our reporting letter. Now, the reporting letter actually means that it prepares a report back also to the NDIS in the event that there is an issue that comes out. Our reporting letter is pretty stock standard in terms of what happens, and it is something that organizations actually do. So we look at what was the incident and when was this referred to POTA, had this involved a brief, what was consequently the actions coming out of this, were there other authorities that were notified, and what were the actions taken. And we find this just a very effective way of actually managing the incidents within an organization. The other part that I will advise as well too on this is when we're looking at incident reports, once it has been done and we have actioned it and sent it off directly to the NDIS, what also comes out is that we mark that it's been completed, and if there was a letter, then we'd attach that, and we can now see that it has been completed. Now, what it gives us is the date and the time that this was lodged, which was 9:55. It was actioned by 11:28. And what we now also have is the audit logs to say what was actually done within the process that we can see here as well too. So you can see that what we've got the ability to then view this as is a complete life cycle of the incident report from start to finish. I do encourage you, if you are watching this recording after today's live session, to actually jump in and have a look at the dashboard and also the incident reports. If you do have any questions on today's session, I do ask that you can, we will keep the phone lines open and more than happy to stay online and answer these. If you did have any questions, you can also use the chat box and we will come to you as well. If you did have any other further questions after today's live session, by all means, you can drop in and see us if you're in Victoria, or reach out to us either via email on support@gemba360.com, or you can contact us directly on 1300 360 360. The next session that we are running will be extending this incident reporting and including risk registers. Now, this will be held next week, and we will be looking at this on Tuesday, actually next week. So we will be running another session next Tuesday, and this will focus directly on incident reporting, but importantly, risk registers. The risk registers, just to give you a quick preview of where we are heading with those, is on the reporting requirements. If we look in here under the risk registers, here we are here, and it is all about NDIS reporting, and also looking at things like the core standards that you need to be across, and also the reporting requirements under the NDIS standards specifically for risk register reporting. So it is something that we will be covering next week due to the requirements that and interest that organizations and NDIS providers have had. So I would like to say thank you for joining us today. We will be opening up the dashboard and circulating all of these slides and materials to you today. We will also reach out to all attendees today as well too. So if you have any questions, more than happy to stay online at the minute and answer those, or we will actually reach out to you over the next, actually will be today and tomorrow, due to the huge number of NDIS providers attending us. Thank you all for joining us. We will stop the recording and we look forward to seeing you next week. Bye for now.